I just walked across the bridge at Niagara Falls. They asked me where I was going. And I said, well, I just want to see the American side of the falls. And they said, how long are you going to be here? I said, a day. So they said, okay, let me in. So I go to the train station. I'm on my way to Las Vegas to become a professional gambler. And in northern Las Vegas, a train stops. And I think, oh, shit. The RCMP have called them and said, stop that train. Johnny Barbour, this thief, is wanted in Toronto, which was true. So I get off the train, and the closest place I could get to, Sam, was Lake Tahoe. So I get on the bus, I go to Lake Tahoe, and I get on in front of the Cal Neva Lodge. Now you can imagine this. As a kid, I lived in the theater, and for a nickel, I could see two movies. And my favorite was, of course, Jimmy Stewart movies and Frank Capra movies. That's why I fell in love with America. And Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. So I walk in there, and it's like walking into an MGM set. And the first thing I do is I buy the Stetson to put on my head so that, I'm not all hat and no cattle or something, whatever that expression is. And oh my God, it was like a technicolor world for me. And I walked around a while and I soaked it up. And then I went to the end of the crap table and I started playing craps, and I was holding my own, and people started looking at me. I thought, oh my God, they know I'm only 17 years of age. They're going to call the law on me. And I thought, oh God, what am I going to do? But I kept doing it. And then pretty soon people at the bar, Sam, were looking over my way. Then I realized they were not looking at me. They were looking past me. So I turned around to see what they were looking at. And walking through these glass doors, arm in arm, was Frank Sinatra.
Oh, snaps.
With Sam Giancana. And his overcoat was draped over him like an Italian Superman. They had about 5 Italian Praetorian guards. Everybody got deathly quiet as they walked by. A week earlier, I had seen him in the movie As the Clouds Roll By, the Jerome Kern story. And there's Sinatra at the end. And I'm sure you've seen this. He's standing on this white pedestal singing Old Man River, every bit as good as Paul Robeson. And 25 years later, by accident, I was his private writer for 4.5 years.
Whoa.
Well, you've just touched on something there that I was going to wait till later, but it seems appropriate now. You might be the only person I'll ever get to meet who's actually met Dean Martin and Steve Allen. Is that right? Did you meet Dean Martin? I see him on your credits.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to jump forward and tell you a couple of stories about Dean Martin, if you don't mind.
I would love it. Dean Martin's one of my comedy heroes. I grew up on Martin and Lewis. It's everything to me. So please.
I just feel bad that these kids, because cable used to be where you could watch all the classics.
Yeah.
And now, because of these streaming services, they're just churning out so much new stuff. You never get any of the old stuff.
Nothing. Yeah.
Well, it's heartbreaking you don't get the old stuff, Sam, because my wife and I feel we lived through the golden age of American entertainment and politics. And the politics ended on November 22nd, 1963, when the government murdered John Kennedy in a public assassination, just like they did Julius Caesar. Anyway, to Dean Martin. Dean Martin was by far the most professional entertainer I ever met who was a major star. I was on his show a half a dozen times. His show was produced by a guy named Greg Garrison. I'll tell you what a nice guy Dean Martin was. My son, at 6 years of age, was a Caucasian Tiger Woods. And Dean Martin used to lose $2,000 a day, every day, at the Riviera Country Club. And it was play money for him because he was unbelievably rich. Well, one day he sees me playing with my 6-year-old son, hitting a few balls, and he comes over and he says, John, hey, that's your son? I said, yeah, Christopher. He goes over to Christopher and he says to Christopher, how would you like to play 18 holes of golf with me? my son says, Daddy, can I do that? And I said, absolutely, get in the car. And what Dean did? Now, the two guys that hustled him lied about their handicaps, but Dean didn't care. He just loved playing with them, and he would give them $2,000 a day. And I'll explain to you how he became so rich. So Dean would have my son hit a ball 30 yards. Dean would hit it 185, maybe 200. He'd pick up my son's ball, drive up, pick up his. They played 18 entire holes like that. 18.
That's
so
generous.
about 14 years ago, I was remembering that story, and I thought I'd send Dean a thank you note because he used to send me notes all the time because he loved my work. And he told me not to tell people that he loved my work about the assassination and stuff like that. That was private. And he had just died, and he never recovered from the plane crash of his son into the mountains in San Bernardino. But now back to Dean. When I got on his show, his first show, he was hired to be like the Italian Ed Sullivan. Here's a singer, here's an acrobat, here's a puppet, stuff like that. That was not Dean, and he was bombing. And they were going to cancel his show. So his director's name was Greg Garrison. And he called Greg for lunch and thanked him for being his director, and he was off to make some movies. And Greg says, you dumb fucking dago, more people will see you in television, those stupid fucking movies you're making. And he says, but they don't want me anymore. He says, because you're not an Italian Ed Sullivan, you're Dean Martin. What are you known for? The ladies, the booze, and the songs, okay? So Dean says, well, what are you trying to say? Look, you should have a piano bar, and you should walk out and have a drink in your hand.
John,
And you should have a flock of girls around you, and we'll call them the Golden Girls. Okay.
Whoa, I didn't know that. That's crazy, John.
Yeah, the Gold Diggers, I think they're called.
Gold
Anyway,
Diggers,
so
that's even better.
Dean said, if I can talk them into giving me one more chance, will you host my show? And he said, no. I mean, will you produce my show? And he said, no. And Dean said, why wouldn't you produce it? He says, because you got no taste sometimes when it comes to guests. If I'm going to be the producer, I have to have final say of who the guests are. And Dean says, that's wonderful because I hate to think. So I want you to do that. They shook hands. That handshake never made it into writing. And when Dean Martin died, that handshake held up in court. Greg Garrison owned half of everything that Dean Martin owned. Dean Martin became the largest shareholder in RCA, the largest single. He became a billionaire just because of that suggestion. Wow. Now we get to me. I got two stories about me and
John, real quick. I want to tell you why I love that story, because I just feel that like there's so many people out there that just think if they do what somebody else did, that they're going to get the same results. And that's a big problem we have in society right now, where it's not really about equal opportunity. They want equal results, right? And that's not how life works. And the fact that somebody told Dean Martin is like, you're not doing you.
Dean Martin,
right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if you know this comedian, John, but his name is Sebastian Maniscalco. And he's a very big comedian right now. He's the Italian celebrity right now. He's the big Italian celebrity. And we used to go on the road together. And now he's going to be the first comedian to play this new dome in LA called the Intuit Dome that yeah, he's gonna be the first comic
Wow,
to play
didn't
it,
know he was
right?
doing that. Wow.
You know, he just did the Hollywood Bowl with all these big guys, and so we used to co-headline together. And you know, the notion that if I would have done what Sebastian did, we would be in the same place is ridiculous. It worked because that was Sebastian. And so when you hear somebody, and I want people to listen to this, like you have to know you and then play to your strengths in life. That's the key to all of it. It's
You know what imitation is?
the
Imitation is a satirist form of a lack of talent. So now I'm going to get back to Dean.
Thank you for sharing the Dean Martin stuff.
that's a
Hold
great
on.
story,
I
dude.
love
That's a
that.
great story.
I'm not finished with
Oh,
Dean.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm
The
sorry.
best is yet to come.
Please.
Keep going.
It also involves Red Foxx, because Red
Okay,
Foxx
here we go.
Yeah.
was
Love Red
my
Foxx.
mentor as a comic when I started as a comic. And when I got my first entertainment show, I put him on as a guest. And everybody opposed my having him on the show because he used to do these filthy party records. But I knew how witty he could be, because once when I described Jim Garrison to him as being such a hero, Red Fox said, "Heroes ain't born, they're cornered."
That's great. Wow.
Which is the truth, because Jim Garrison was cornered by the only dissenting member of the Warren Commission, Congressman Hale Boggs, which we'll get to later, because I have two really important Dean Martin stories to tell you. Because first of all, I had little or no interest in the assassination at the time. And even though it was after the time I had hosted the AM show and lost my job because I tried to book Jim Garrison after reading his book, Heritage of Stone, but I forgot it. I thought, Sam, that's show business. You have 2 weeks, you have a week, you have a month, you have a year, and then you're gone. So anyway, in the Dean Martin show, like all variety shows, they have a dress rehearsal. And the dress rehearsal is before a live audience, and they keep that audience. So anyway, I'm in the middle of the stage, and they put me in front of the camera. Greg Garrison's up in the booth. He says, "Okay, John, let's go." So I start to do the reason they booked me. It was a routine I did when I was first on the Merv Griffin show. And by the way, when Merv Griffin left Westinghouse to go to CBS, I was signed at his recommendation to Westinghouse to replace him. And so and my ratings were higher than his because I did stand up and he only did bad songs. Greg Garrison hollers upstairs. He says, "Hold it, John, hold it." He comes downstairs and he puts his arm around me. He says, "John, I go to the jazz club and I see you doing some really good political stuff." And he said, "These shows are going to rerun for 30 or 40 years. Do you think you could do maybe a couple of political jokes that might last that long?" Or I said, "Oh, Mr. Garrison, gee, I don't know." He said, "Well, if I give you a couple of minutes to walk around, will you think about it?" And the audience is smiling and a couple of people applaud because they're inside show business. So I start walking around. After 2 minutes, it pops into my head. Wow, crystal clear. So I tap the mic. "Hey, Greg, can I come up and tell you what the joke is?" He says, "You're not swearing?" "No." "We're not going to be sued?" "No." "Okay, forget the Jew stuff and do the new joke." And the audience applauds. So I look at the audience and I said, if you've been reading the paper lately, you'll see that Lyndon Johnson's daughter is engaged to a pilot named Charles Robb. And they all smile. And I said, "What you haven't heard of, though, that Earl Warren, who was the head of the Supreme Court, wants to do the service." And they smile and they nod. And he calls the president and says, "Mr. President, I would like to do the service. It would be an absolute honor." And President Johnson turns him down. And nobody knows why he turns him down, but here's why he turns him down. He says, listen, Earl, after what you did screwing up that goddamn Warren Commission, I don't want to look back in 13 years and find out my daughter ain't married. Well, Sam, you heard the biggest, most thunderous applause I ever heard, because I didn't think anybody thought about Jim Garrison or thought about John Kennedy or thought about that. People were standing up and cheering. Greg rushes down with a guy in a blue suit.
Oh, here we go.
There's standards and practices. They have no standards, and that's what they practice. And the guy says, you were not doing that joke. And I said, hey, hold it. I didn't say anything about Lee Harvey Oswald didn't do it or anything like that. It's just about the war. NBC stands behind the Warren report. You are not going to do that.
Oh my God.
Crazy.
And so
That is
Greg,
so crazy to me.
Greg puts his arm around me, waves to the audience, says, sorry, but John's got to do the Jew stuff again. So I do that, and I'm a huge hit. I'm in a monster hit because they like me because of what I said before. Not these. They've heard these jokes. When it's over, Greg calls me to come upstairs. And I think, oh my God, they're going to offer me a show. That's what I was thinking. So I go upstairs, and Greg says to me, wonderful show, good for you. You know what, John? My favorite women are brunettes. I think, what the hell is Tom telling me this for? And my very favorite brunettes are Mexican. I just love them. Now I know what he's talking about. He's talking about my wife, Sarita. Sarita could dance better than Ginger Rogers. Sarita looked like Jennifer Jones. She was knocked down gorgeous. Everyday celebrities, the biggest, were hitting on her. So he says, do you mind if I ask her out? And I say, Greg, hold it. You have a reputation of fucking everybody's wife in town, and I'm sure you don't. and ask for permission to ball her wives. You just take them to Motel 6 or do whatever it is you do. So don't be asking me. Ask Sarita. So he says, you give me permission to ask Sarita? I said, absolutely. So I start to walk out the door, and I'm really pissed. And then I stop, and I turn, and I said, hey, Greg, do you think you have more sex appeal than Frank Sinatra? He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, Sinatra hits on her all the time. And I mean, often and real. And she always turns him down. Now, if you think you're more appealing than Mr. Sinatra, you go ahead and ask her. And then he says to me, you can kiss your ass and Dean Martin show goodbye.
Whoa.
Damn.
So I leave, and it doesn't matter to me.
That's crazy. And that just totally fits into what garbage Hollywood is. Like, hey, dude, either let me bang your wife or you lose your show.
Everything we hear all the time, though,
Oh
isn't it?
my! Like every day, I get more and more excited about my journey and where I am in my life when I don't realize I got to work with scumbags like that. Scumbags.
Oh, okay. Now this is even better. Oh my God, this is even better. Because Red Foxx was my closest friend. When I had him on my entertainment show, his name was John Sanford. And Norman Lear saw him there, and Red Foxx ad-libbed one of the funniest lines in the history of television. And I'll tell you what the line is. And I was embarrassed to ask the question because I knew his act, and I knew when he could be clean and funny. For example, he walked out, and you know those pants the Scots wear when they play golf? They're rolled up under.
Yeah.
They're called knickers. So when I introduce Red
Here we
comes out.
go. Here we go.
There you go. And Red comes out and just is looking at the audience, doesn't say a word, and the audience is giggling. Then he points at his knickers. He says, I just came back from the South. I heard this name a lot, so I thought I'd buy some. Well, that's it. Okay, so Red sits down, and I ask him about Black Power. That's the time of the Black Power movement. He says, I don't care about Black Power. I don't care about white power because I only care about green power because you got the money. You can buy the places where the whites and blacks hold their meeting. And this is what I had lived, and I was sorry I did because I didn't know what he was going to say. And I leaned back, and you can see it in my YouTube. I leaned back and I said, Red, why do you think money's colored green? Without missing a beat, he says, oh, that's because Jews pick it before it gets ripe. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. What a
Fire, dude.
Oh, dude. So quick to be that quick, man.
Yeah.
Red Fox is the best. I loved Red Fox growing up, dude.
He and Jackie Mason were the two quickest comics I ever known. And my first pilot for Real People at ABC, Jackie Mason, was going to be my consumer advocate. Now we get to the best part of the Red Fox story.
Great voices, too, by the way. Jackie Mason and Red Fox, two of the greatest voices in comedy.
I remember Jackie Mason's first joke when I say I was deported from the United States twice. I don't want to get into the first story, which could be a movie. It's hilarious. But it was in the mid-50s. I was not a comic. I didn't even know I could write or do anything like that. I was just here wanting to be in America. I didn't want to be in Canada. And he's on the Ed Sullivan Show. And his first line was, I'm so insecure when I go to a football game and they huddle. I think they're talking about me. It's a joke. And we became friends for life, as I did with Red Fox, and helped him get his one-man show in Hollywood, which led to a series of shows in New York City. I got thousands of these stories. But in any event, Red Fox's name was John Sanford. Norman Lear acquired a property called Steptoe and Son from England, turned it into Sanford and Son.
Wow.
And he called himself, he called himself Fred because his older brother, whom he really admired, died. That's why he became Fred Sanford on the show.
Wow.
And he was Malcolm X's closest friend. They stole and went to jail together. And if you go to my website,
Whoa.
if you go to johnbarbersworld.com, you will see a dozen interviews with Red Fox, and he talks about going to jail with Malcolm X and sleeping on the roof of buildings in the wintertime because he had no place to sleep. But anyway, being so close. And also with Sinatra. Okay, so Dean Martin now goes on to do the roasts. And I am Frank Sinatra's private writer for 4.5 years. When he gets the Tonight Show, because he was not fond of Johnny Carson.
Who wasn't? Who was that?
And Johnny Carson tried to get rid of me a half a dozen times for 5 years that I was winning consecutive Emmys at NBC. I never had a contract. I was fired 3 times and brought back the next day by public demand. Carson was just the most insecure drunk I ever met. I don't want to tell this story, but
let's go.
Okay, so but I will tell you this story about Frank Sinatra. He is going to be roasted on Dean Martin's show. So he calls me up. Now, at the time, I'm working on the revival of Laugh-In as their critic at large and writing the stuff for Sinatra. And I'm the only one he wants to write his jokes. And so Slaughter has a staff of 16 writers. He fires them all except for me. I'm on there. And that's a show we introduced Robin Williams on. And oh my God, what an explosion of talent. In any event, Francis calls me and he says, I'm going to be on Dean's roast, and you're going to be the first one on the dais. And I said, Greg Garrison is going to let you book me on that show. He said, yeah, I'm going to call right now. He calls back in about 2 minutes. And he says, what the fuck did you do to Greg Garrison? He said, no. And he said, I wouldn't call Dean because Dean had promised Greg that he could produce the show. So I'm really sorry about that. I said, hey, don't be sorry at all, for God's sake. Do you know what an honor it is for me? I was an orphan kid here when I was 17. Now I'm writing and friends with the most prominent entertainer in America. And I don't give a shit if anybody knows it. I know it. And it makes me happy.
Oh, that's so nice.
Well, something will happen. So anyway, he gets a Tonight Show and calls me and says, okay, now it's your turn to be on the Tonight Show. Now, if you go to my YouTube, you will see the 5 minutes that I wrote turned into almost 10 minutes. And there's a great story about how Carson tried to sabotage me there. But back to Dean Martin.
Dang, bro, that's so crazy. Go back to Dean. What do you want to get in, one more time? Pick up where you were.
First off, I've got to tell you, there is no profession harder than being a comic.
I agree, dude.
You got a singer, you got a band behind you, you're a soldier, you got a gun in your hand, you got soldiers. But when you're a comic, you have to stand there bare naked soul and make people laugh. And in my book is about 20 pages of all the great comics that I have known. I spent the last week with Lenny Bruce before the police murdered him. But I don't want to get to that. I just want to finish telling this story. Now, Red Foxx is going to be on the Dean Martin show, the roast. So he calls me and says, I'm going to be on the roast and you're going to be on the roast. And I said, I do not think so. You haven't talked to Mr. Garrison yet. He said, I'll get right back to you. So he goes into the office and he gives him a list of the comics that he would like to have. And on top of the list is John Barbour. And Greg Garrison says, oh, give me the list. He tears off John and he throws it in the trash. And he says, Red, there will be no John Barbour on this roast. And Red said, then find yourself another nigger.
Oh, man. Bang, bang, pow. Bang, bang, pow.
Now, Greg has no choice. They got to call me. And he says, listen, I hate making this phone call, but the only way I can get Red on the show is to have you on, and I'll have some of the guys write stuff for you. I said, hold a second. You're not going to have anybody write anything for me, ever. I write my own stuff all the time. And I will write 4 or 5 minutes because I know you got a lot of people coming on the show. If you do not like it in your office, I will not do the show, and I'll tell Red I don't want to do the show because I'm not invited. So I go into his office. There's nobody there except me and him.
Oh, dude, this is crazy, right?
And I do my 5 minutes. And he stares at me and he stares at me.
Whoa.
He says, if my fucking writers could write like that, we'd be all fucking billionaires. Got your 5 minutes. Okay. I said, now the other thing you're going to do. What do you mean the other thing I'm going to do? You're on. That's enough. I said, listen, you have all the comics on a dais, and the audience is out there, and in front of the audience are these cue cards with all the fucking jokes on them. You're not putting my stuff on a cue card. It's up here in my head, and that's where it's going to stay. Okay? So he says, okay, now that's what happened. Now my 4 or 5 minutes turns into 10 minutes. Gee, you know what? I will tell you, the biggest laugh, the best joke ever written at that time.
Snaps, let's go.
Was a joke that I wrote about Red Foxx. No, I want you to see it in its entirety. It's 4 minutes. You go to YouTube, you Google Dean Martin Roast with Red Foxx and John Barbour. So I don't want to repeat it because anyway, I killed. And the 5 minutes went to 10. And Dean comes up and he puts his arm around me like that.
John Barbour, but it's B-O-U.
I have it here. If you
Okay.
want.
Oh, you found it? He's got it. All right, we're going to play it real quick. Let's hear
Oh,
it.
yeah, it's only 3 or 4 minutes. Play it. It's just
Is it this, John? Can you see
John
this?
Barbour roast Red Foxx, March 1st, 1974.
Is that
yeah,
it?
that's it. Play
All
it.
right, it's 2 minutes, 2 seconds. Let's hear it.
Look at us.
Oh, wow. Look at that guy.
Wow, I know, right?
Can you turn it up, Johnny?
Hold on. We're not getting sound through. Hold on. I got to change one thing. Just a second.
It's going to be great.
Where were you, Sam?
Where was I? And I was 2
He's the
years
guy
old.
that told Red, guest is motion
God, nobody cooler than Dean Martin. Look at that. He's so cool.
picture and television critic John Barbour. He's the guy that told Red that his nightclub act was pornographic. Red thought that was a compliment, and he went out and had his picture taken. Ladies and gentlemen, here's NBC's critic at large, Mr. John Barbour.
Ladies and gentlemen, and those of you who are uncommitted to either sex, for 10 years I have called Red Foxx friend, and for 10 years he's called me Bob. As a comedian, Red Foxx knows no equals. Superiors, yes. Equals, no. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege for me to be here this evening to honor Red Foxx as the Man of the Week, even though his wife says it isn't that often. Red Fox's nightclub act is the only thing in show business dirtier than Peter Fox trench coat. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Red Foxx was born in St. Louis, known throughout America as Baja Pittsburgh. Red has seen a lot of changes in society and show business since he began. Red Foxx can remember when Sammy Davis was a Negro. Then he became a black. Then he embraced Judaism. And he was Jewish until he embraced Nixon. Now he's a Negro again.
Bang, fire, buddy. Fire.
Okay, so now Dean puts his arm around me. He said, "Wow, I had to listen to that shit for 10 minutes." The audience screams because here's their idol, Dean Martin, saying shit in front of the world. And oh my God. Well, I don't let anybody call my material shit. I turned to Dean and I said, "Dean, in the words of our esteemed guest, fuck you." Well, everybody fell off their seats. Jesus Christ, how could Johnny Barbour do such a horrible thing like this? He'll destroy his career. Oh my God, there was absolute thunder because it went all around the country because that was a feed to New York and everything else.
Uh-oh.
And yet, I became a closer friend to Dean after that show when we play golf together often. And the same happened when I was a critic. When I bombed Burt Reynolds unbelievably, and I'm doing a Saturday night show for 90 minutes on NBC, he calls up and he says, "Hey, what time do I have to be there?" "I didn't book you." He said, "I don't give a shit. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be on your show." That's the best interview Burt Reynolds ever did in his life. And the same thing happened with Neil Simon. I blasted Neil Simon because he did the Sunshine Boys. And I said, you know, if royalties were paid to William Shakespeare, he still wouldn't make as much money as Neil Simon. Neil Simon does not need major studios like Fox or NBC, MGM or Universal to do his movie. If he loves his work, he pays for it himself. And in New York, the Sunshine Boys starred Sam Levine and Jack Alberson, two real Jews playing two real Jewish comics. They were so good. Anybody who was Presbyterian could identify with them. Anybody who was Catholic, okay? So now he comes out here to Hollywood. 20th Century Fox turns it into a film. Walter Matthau gives the only bad performance in his life. George Burns, the only poor performance in his life. And I said, the next thing that Simon has to write is a letter firing himself as his own casting director.
Dude, that's so funny.
That's
so
what I
funny.
would do. And you know what? Hang on a second here. I wasn't expecting the show. Here's a small book. It's called The Greatest Reviews I Ever Read. And it's written by a woman who wrote 6 novels, but she was the one who helped edit my big book, Your Mother's Not a Virgin, discovered I was a film critic for 10 years at LA Magazine. She wrote this book, which is just hysterical, recapping the reviews that I did and the responses to them, stuff like that. So anyway, that's where we are. And
That's John Barbour, everybody. That's the wonderful career. And it's very interesting, John, because I don't know if you've been able to see.
It's gone from roasting Red Foxx to tinfoil hat.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
What I do
he's
find
done it
very
all.
amazing
He's done
is
everything.
when John is talking about the impact of this roast, and we just had this big roast of Tom Brady, the football player, on Netflix, and a good friend of ours went up there and kind of like changed his life. He was already killing it, but like this brought him to another level. And he was doing jokes that were very, John, when you were doing the jokes that you were talking about, it really blew my mind because it is kind of parallel to what we just saw my friend go through, these societal norms that he's pushing back again. And it's interesting to me because the political, and this is kind of, when you kind of look at like where censorship has come from, when in your day, the censorship, and I could be wrong, but it seemed to come from the right to the left. And whereas now it's the left to the right. And it sounds like when what you were doing was kind of pushing back on that and putting out kind of stuff that the establishment maybe wasn't ready for or didn't want. And for some reason, this roast is kind of like catapulted this kind of comedy that we just had to.
You're talking about the Tom Brady roast.
The Tom Brady roast.
And the reason for that is not only was he funny, he was telling the truth.
Yes, 100%. And that is it. Like, that's where we are right now. We've gotten so far away from being provocative. Nobody can be provocative anymore.
Sam, speaking of right now, listen, if you are silent, you are a co-conspirator in any crimes being committed that
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, so I write jokes about everybody, but I'm going to tell you too, and I have sent a couple to you. You're the only one I send them to, hoping that you might mouth them because I don't go on. I only go on as a guest now, and I like to be by myself. Anyway, I live in the gambling capital of the world, as you very well know. It's the Vatican, and it's the Mecca of gambling. And the thing that they are betting on now is not a hockey game during the NHL playoffs. It's not basketball. It's not anything. It's politics, and it happens to be Donald Trump. And what they're betting on is whether or not Donald Trump will take the stand in defense of himself in this trial where Stormy Daniels just testified yesterday and testifies again tomorrow. And I only bet on two things. I bet on hockey because I helped create the celebrity hockey team in Hollywood, which is still going strong with an actor named Bo Swenson. And the other thing, all the years I've been in the United States legally, I have never lost a bet on an election. And it has nothing to do, Sam, with the fact that I'm a political pundit, because I'm not. I just absolutely hate politics.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But as a comic, if you make jokes, you have to be fair and make them on both sides. So I made them when Trump was running and Hillary, the Wicked Witch of the North, was running, who shouldn't have been up there. Bernie Sanders should have played that tape of that Wicked Witch of the North saying about Gaddafi, we came, we saw, we murdered.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ, what a dreadful woman. Anyway, so the jokes I wrote about her got bigger laughs. And so I was one of the very first people to say Donald Trump is going to win this election. MSNBC, NBC, CBS, every bit of mainstream media called it for Hillary. And I called it for Donald Trump, which he won. Okay, so now I made a very large bet on the fact that he is going to take the stand.
Whoa. People are betting on that? Damn.
Yes, because to get him to close his mouth is tougher than getting the hookers at the Bunny Ranch in Pahrump to close their legs.